Good morning, everyone. Michigan Department of Health and Human Services welcomes you to the fourth annual Harm Reduction Summit. My name is Brandon Houle. I'm a harm reduction analyst with the Viral Hepatitis Unit here at MHRS. It's also my pleasure to be one of the planners of this event. So we'll just get started with a few housekeeping tasks. Number one, you're encouraged to use the chat and Q&A functions throughout the sessions. Just please be respectful in your discussions, and we'll be posting community guidelines at each session in the chat. Number two, after the event, you'll receive an email with a link to complete an evaluation. We appreciate any feedback you have for us. You also need to complete that evaluation in order to receive any continuing education credits you requested. You may also be asked for mailing information so that you can receive a summit attendance package. Third, there's going to be a networking function available during the breaks between sessions. So you'll just click on the people icon on the left, and the networking feature will connect you with a random attendee. You'll be able to talk to for 1 to 5 minutes, and if you really like how the conversation is going, you'll be able to choose to extend that. So again, my pleasure to welcome you to the summit. And just a few words on the background of harm reduction in Michigan and our theme this year, which is normalize diverse perspectives. For harm reduction, my role in MDHHS is to support the expansion of harm reduction services in the state of Michigan. More specifically, the Viral Hepatitis Unit, we work to expand syringe service programs. And we've done a lot of that. When I started working with MDHHS, contracting with MDHHS in 2018, we had 5 syringe service programs serving the entire state of Michigan. At this point, we've got 35 programs available through 85 locations across the state. And we're going to be talking more about that later in the summit. So while this expansion has been incredible to see and to be part of, it seems like the more we expand, the more needs that we see. And we don't fully understand those needs. And we don't know how to serve every community. And we rely on the people from those communities to understand those needs and to serve them in the way that they know how. So, harm reduction in general, it's broader than simply syringe access. Harm reduction, really, to sum it up, it loves somebody for who they are, where they are, and it respects and trusts the decisions they make on their own journey. It normalizes everyone. Harm reduction says that you might think, act, believe differently than me, but that's normal too. And to be honest, if everybody thought and acted the way I did, the world would probably be a much more messed up place, if I'm going to be honest. And so we know substance use has, people have used substances to alter their consciousness throughout human history. And that's all over the world. That's through all societies. It's not something we can remove from our society. And so we know that there are harms associated, and apologies, my phone is ringing. We have, I'm one of the summit planners, so apologies for my breaking my train of thought. But, we know substance use, there's certain harms associated with that. We know we can reduce those harms. Just like any other activity we participate in as humans, there can be harms involved, and we can reduce that. And today we have even more technology and tools that we can use to do that. But unfortunately, what we see is that there's disparities in how these harms affect different groups of people. We know that the same substance, exactly the same chemical composition, can be used by people of different races, different countries of origin, and have very different health outcomes, even though there's no race or country of origin or sexuality is not going to affect how that substance affects somebody's body. We know that there's disparities in what we see in these outcomes, and that's not biological. We know that those are structures and systems, that cause that, and really at this point, we don't know how to serve everyone. We don't know what the needs are, and even as a person with a history of substance use, I don't fully understand how we can reduce this harm in all groups of people. How can we address these structural injustices? And so, as a person with a history of substance use, I understand a little, but today I'm a representative of the state of Michigan. And so I think the best thing for me to do at this point is to stop talking and listen to our speakers. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Banashi Kudrow to make introductions and kick us off.
Buju, Anin, Nadijni Kash Banashi, Wababiji Dodum, Gunjaba, Washington, Gunjaba, Badawing, Gunjaba, Colorado Springs. What I said was, hey, my name is Banashi. It means all of the birds. I am part of the Martin clan or the Warrior clan. And I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was raised in Sault Ste. Marie and Colorado Springs. And I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank Brandon and the organizers for making sure they provided a spot and a voice for Indigenous voices. As Brandon had discussed, this thing we call harm reduction looks different in every community, and it looks especially different in Indian country. And our panel today will hopefully cover some of those indifferences. And I'm pleased to welcome my niece, Jonathan Reinhardt, who is a licensed therapist at the Nada Wasapi Huron Band of Potawatomi Indians here in Grand Rapids. And he's worked with addiction and sobriety issues since the time I've known him. And that led me into my work. And so I was honored when the state reached out to my organization to help put this panel together, as we did a harm reduction grant this past year that had a profound impact all across the state. And hopefully Philomena and Jonathan will help fill the gaps that we have in Indian country between our tribal governments and also dominant medicine, Western culture. And linking those two things together. And so Jonathan's going to be speaking about how he uses some of our cultural teachings and helping those in their journey and their path with sobriety and harm reduction and addiction services. And Philomena is going to also talk, as she is kind of like one of the forefronts in Indigenous country that started doing the harm reduction. And so it was important to us that we were able to speak and honor everybody and welcome everybody in our traditional language, because that is the best way to do a land acknowledgement. By us saying our language and our names and our clans, we're literally honoring all those ancestors that were here before us. And we're also letting them know that come after us that we're here too. And so I want to thank the state for making sure that we were able to do that. And at this point, I'm just going to let Jonathan introduce himself. And we're having some technical difficulties with our other panel talent. And once she gets here, I'll introduce her as well. But we'll turn this over to Jonathan. So if everybody would just listen to what Jonathan has to say, he's a wise man. Miigwech. That means thank you.
Wow, Buju Kenegwaya. I don't get called wise too often, but I'll try to live up to that. Naniban Makwa Indigenous, Waganaxing Odao Anishinaabe Adao, Wishiki and Doden, Awashnang in the Bayan, Bedasage and Donjiba. Get you that Damapi, Nungom Gijigat. Truly, it is an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to be here today and to talk a little bit about some of the work and experience, some of our cultural life ways that I incorporate in my practice in supporting individuals in the recovery process. But first, I'd like to start off in a good way, a way in which it is that we as Anishinaabe like to bring our gatherings together. Joe had mentioned something about a land acknowledgement, and when we recognize that we were here long time ago, and that the lands in which we all reside on is lands of Indigenous people to this particular area. But one thing I'd like to acknowledge is that each and every one of us, we're all Indigenous to the planet. And in that way, and in our way of thinking, that we're all related. So whenever we come together in this way, we'll light a muscadilla smudge. I'm using the abalone shell here, and this is some good field sage that my family has gathered, and I'd like to offer out a virtual smudge for those of you that may be new to the smudging practice. In this ceremony, we're just inviting in that positive energy, and doing so is sending away the negative energy. So although it's virtual, as Native people, we recognize that all medicine has spirit, and that spirit can move with the speed of thought. So when we smudge, we bring this medicine to our face, over our head, over our ears, over our heart, over our whole being, so that we will see the goodness of one another. Will think good thoughts of one another, hear good things about one another, have good feelings about one another, and walk in a good way. So I just hold this smudge up for those of you that would like to participate virtually. If you feel comfortable with it, you just bring that smudge to you. And this way, it's connecting us all, bringing our hearts, our minds, our bodies, our spirits all together for the purpose of this conversation. So, with that, I'm going to do an honor song to continue and bringing us all together. But our other panelist has arrived, so I'd like to just give a little bit of airtime to share an introduction from her.
Yeah, so I'd like to introduce everybody to Philomena Quebec. She is I call her an OG in the harm reduction in Indigenous communities. I've done a lot of research on her since I got to meet her when we put this panel together, and she is what we call in our language an Ogichi-da-kwe. It means a warrior woman. And she's kind of laid a lot of the foundations for a lot of us to follow. And so I just want to turn it over to Philomena so that she can introduce herself. And then we'll go into Jonathan's honor song, and then we'll get going with this panel. So Chimigwich, Philomena, for coming. You're muted.
Okay, hello?
There you are.
Oof, it has been a week. Huju Indinawe Maniduk, Babiwash Indigenous Makondode, Mashkazi being Indonjiba. So I'm coming to you from the Bad River Reservation. I just got back to my land last night. Oh my goodness, I had this crazy bus, train, car, plane, bikes. I just got back to my territory from the Hubent Valley Nation, where I was visiting some relatives about land issues. But I'm really glad to be with you all here today. I I did not expect Joe to say that. And, you know, like I don't even know what to say about that, but, you know, I've been working in my community. I came back about 10 years ago, to keep people alive and to keep people healthy and moving forward. Our program is called Gweat Kopamat Win Bad River Needle Exchange. We started in 2014 to work with people in our community who are using drugs and, you know, provide them with options and access and information and social support and friendship and, you know, needle exchange, Narcan, all that. And really providing sort of a clearinghouse of information for folks who really didn't have other access to information and support. So it's really grown from here, and we're working on moving into the next stage of our program's development, where we're going to be employing a lot of people who are using or have used drugs to move forward with you know, providing support and providing the support that people need. We operate in northern Wisconsin off the south shore of Lake Superior. And I'm just really, really glad to be here today. You know, my land acknowledgement is, if you're here, you're on Anishinaabe land, and you better be respectful. And that is, that's, you know, respect is the foundation of our relationships with human beings and non-human beings, like our more than human being relatives that we share the earth with. And when you're here on our territory, in our lands, and I don't care who owns the property or not, you need to be respectful to the people that are around you and to those more than human people as well. So I'm really excited to hear the song, Miigwech. Thanks for letting me be here today.
Yahweh, So, excuse me. There's a lot to talk about today. One of the things I would like to start off on is a passage from this book, the Healing Soul Wounds, Trauma Informed Counseling for Indigenous Communities. It's a pretty deep book, something that provides some wonderful reading, some different ways to take a look at the recovery process, and in some of my deliberation today, I hope to talk a little bit about some of the content that is in this book. But let me start off with this reading. Upon suffering beyond suffering, the red nation shall rise again, and it shall be a blessing for the sick world, a world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separation, a world longing for light again. I see a time of 7 generations when all the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one circle again. In that day, among the native who will carry the knowledge and understanding of unity among all living things, and the young white ones will come to those of my people and ask for wisdom. I salute the light within their eyes where the whole universe dwells. For when we are at the center within you, I am at that center place with me. We are one. It's a passage quoted from Crazy Horse. So with that, I'd like to just take the opportunity to express my gratitude for the organizers and for those that have asked us to come forward and to share part of our Native perspective in harm reduction and supporting individuals in the recovery process. And just like to encourage us all to put our hearts and our minds together and become one as we lift up our gratitude and our appreciation for this beautiful gift of creation that we all get to share. Let us put our minds and our hearts together and become one and express our gratitude and appreciation for the air that we breathe, for the water that we drink, for the life that comes forward to support our life in the form of food, whether that's vegetarian or with meat. Otherwise, we just express our gratitude and our appreciation. I'd like to have us put our hearts and our minds together and become one and lift up our gratitude and our appreciation of all wisdom that's in the earth, here on the earth, that we have the opportunity to gain access to that knowledge and to put it in application and wisdom. And with that, we are all one. Aha. Miigwech.
Jonathan, could you please repeat the name of the book? Philomena has asked, and there are several people in attendance that asked for it as well.
Yeah, no problem. The Healing the Soul Wounds. It's a fabulous book for those of you fellow readers who enjoy getting your information on Audible. It is available that way too. And it becomes a good story time, taking us back to those times where we enjoyed stories being read to us. So as I was mentioning, there is so much to share today, and I don't want to be the only voice. So let me kind of yield a little time here and have my co-panelists talk a little bit on her part in regards to recovery and harm reduction.
Oh, so nice. Thank you so much for that song. That was beautiful.
Oh.
So I'm gonna, I think narratives are really important to use because it's much easier to hang on to than, just facts and figures and metrics. I think we can talk about that too when we're talking about harm reduction, but I feel like stories are so important. So I came home, like I said, in about 2011. I'm from Bad River. I'm enrolled here, but I never lived here. And my grandma left. She left in the 1930s and maybe even earlier than that because all of her parents died, and she had to take care of her siblings. So she was working, off reservation for a really long time. So I came home because there was a mining company that wanted to put in one of the largest or open pit iron mines in the whole world, 6 miles away from our reservation. So I came home and I worked on that, and we made that project go away in about 3 years, despite the fact that we had a lot of the very, very powerful people in the state and the country really wanted to see this project happen. We're at a powerful place here in Bad River. We're right on the lake, and we're really at the heart of things, the heart of the Anishinaabe Nation, just outside of Madeline Island, or at least the heart of the Ojibwe Nation. And so this is a really powerful place. And what we saw in 2014 was that people started dying from using pills, and there were a lot of pills being, we were sort of at that was the tail end of the crisis with the prescription medications, and the access to prescription medications was going away, and people started moving into injecting drugs, heroin, methamphetamines, things like that. So I was there, doing my work, my advocacy as an attorney in the area of environmental protection. But then, they also put me on child protection as well. So I started to get a firsthand look into the families in Bad River that were affected by substance use disorder. And that was a real experience that changed me. What was really hard about that job was that these families were losing their children, and then because they lost their children, they would lose their housing, because all the families that were on the caseload were in poverty. So they would lose their public housing and then lose their everything, lose their entire identities with the loss of their children because of substance use disorder. And we did not have good options for these families. No tools were really available to help them get back on the track. And so I became really disheartened with my position, because I'm the kind of person who wants to see solutions. I don't want to just see, there's this one track where, there's a case with an Indian family, there's substance use disorder, and then the kids get taken away, and that's it, and we throw the parents out. And so my friends and I started researching this idea of harm reduction and figuring out what this was, because we didn't know at all. And looking on the internet and searching for information about it. And what we learned is that harm reduction seems to have a much better alignment with our traditional values as Ojibwe people, because it's based in trust and respect. The very foundation of harm reduction is that every person is empowered to make the choices that they need to make for themselves in order to move forward. And it's very different from child protection world, where there's our way or the highway, and if you don't go our way, you're going to lose everything. And so we started looking at this as an approach to work with people, a different sort of methodology. We needed to get sterile syringes in the community because people did not have access to them, and we were concerned about disease transmission. So that was that's been a cornerstone of our program that we have had in place since 2015. And we try to serve everybody as much as we can. We have not had resources in order to provide really good service. But, my friends and I have been providing people with sterile works and naloxone and other life-saving things out of the backs of our car, the garage, and then getting a good return on the syringes that go out, because we always provide sharps containers, and we encourage people to dispose of their works with us so that we don't have to worry about as much community litter of syringes, because that becomes a really serious public relations issue for people who inject drugs. So, we've been working on this and doing this since 2015. We have a website, and I'm not sure how to put it in the chat, but I'll figure that out. Our website is badriverharmreduction.org. And we published a little book that provides a lot more background into our program, into our specific philosophies, how we go about it. Thanks, Joe. And and you can kind of explore the website, look at the book. I owe some people, I think I owe Brandon and some other folks copies of the book, physical copies. We have physical copies too that we can send out and around. And if you have a program that has any money, we can invoice you for those copies of the book. So just, shoot an email over and we can hook you up with that, or else just look at the website. But, I'm what harm reduction, the other thing that harm reduction is about is, it's nothing, nothing about us without us is one of the phrases that we often use when we're talking about harm reduction. So this means that the leadership of the program, leadership of harm reduction, ideally should not be someone like me, who is a program person. I mean, I do have a limited experience of substance use disorder when I was younger, but that's not really that's not part of my identity necessarily. And so I've been working for a really long time to take myself out of the picture and mentor women and men, Native women and men in this community, so that they can take over the work of harm reduction, and lifting harm reduction up, professionalizing this work, demonstrating that the incredible kindness and the power, the life-saving power that people have who are actively using drugs to help our communities is the safety net of this country. Okay? If we did not have economically disadvantaged people helping each other, this world that we live in would go to hell. And I can see that quite vividly in my community, where we have, people who use drugs, maybe people who sell drugs, are not the pariahs that we envision them to be, but they are people who are saving lives, who are helping other folks, who are feeding people, who are making sure that people have a safe place to live. And of course, there's a lot of awful, dangerous stuff that happens too, because when you're out there using, you're really vulnerable. But it's nothing is all good and nothing is all bad, And what we've done in this country is that we've said that everyone who uses drugs is bad, no matter what. And I think a lot of that mentality has taken hold in Native communities, because it harkens back to the boarding school period, where the teaching methodology within the boarding schools was to physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually punish anyone who stepped out of line, anyone who exhibited any sort of neurodivergence. And what I know about the people who use drugs in my community is there's a lot of people who have mental health disorders, a lot of people who are neurodivergent and don't necessarily fit in with Western capitalistic ideals. I mean, these are often the people who have substance use disorder and who are struggling. And in our communities, instead of our taught, like the way that we have been taught through that boarding school mentality has been to isolate them. So that's when we hear about, all these calls to banish people who use in our communities or people who sell drugs in our communities. I feel like that's certainly like a boarding school mentality. And, the work of harm reduction and the work that I'm trying to do personally in my own life is to really explore my thinking, my brain, how my thinking works, to figure out like what is the boarding school mentality and like what is the true Anishinaabe mentality, really thinking through how I can rework my mind in order to take away that that really painful and debilitating teaching that came through that boarding school, that very painful boarding school process. And, I feel like harm reduction is a methodology that we can explore in our communities to, as an antidote to, the sociological way that our, that boarding school has taught us to be in community. So I'm, I don't know. I think I'm going to turn it back over to you guys. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to just be having a conversation. I think Joe is going to be asking us some questions and stuff, but we're sort of set up to move forward in that, right?
Yeah. So one of the questions I have is maybe each one of you can speak on it because we represent different communities. Is how does harm reduction look in here in Michigan compared to Bad River? And also how we use the culture and decolonization in our recovery efforts, because a lot of people think that our people just take Western medicine. And we all know that that's not, that isn't made for us, just like Western culture isn't. So maybe you could speak about that. I know, Jonathan, you use a blend that works for most people. So maybe each of you could speak about that and your different approaches to it.
Well, I could speak a little bit about what the Netawasipi here on Band of Potawatomi is engaged in and supporting individuals in the recovery process. And we have, it's an Indian health clinic, so there's the levels of cares that would include traditional health, a health clinic, in the form of doctors and nurses and all of that. The behavioral health department, dental, we have a dental department, nutritionists. There's a lot of things that are in the clinic to just support families generally. One of the things I think that it is important to acknowledge is that we're meeting individuals where they're at, but most importantly, that we're not leaving them there. We have to recognize and realize that there are different ways that individuals come to recovery. Some people can snap their fingers and they'd be all done with their addiction. Other people have to get involved with recovery support groups like AA or Wellbriety, or go to church, go to ceremonies, go to therapy, phone a friend. I mean, there's so many different ways that people do recover. NHBP brought me on board. I'm losing track now, 5-6 years ago, maybe, as a case manager. So my position then was to support individuals in the recovery process. We had access to federal dollars in the form of now I'm trying to blank on the name of it, but access to recovery, I believe, was the name of that grant, and then it transitioned into the tribal opiate response, the TOR grant, which was exclusively supporting individuals in the recovery process with opiate addiction history. So in our clinic, we brought on supports to support individuals, whether that's therapists, case management. We also accessed grant money to purchase Narcan kits and freely distribute them to anybody who had any proximity with anybody who had interactions with opiates. So we did a widespread distribution. They're still available at the clinic. That if anybody ever says that they have some a need for that, then we just show them that little tutorial video, have them sign it, and send them on their way. Through the TOR grant, we've also had dollars to link, connect, and coordinate individuals to their identified recovery plan, whether that was therapy or go to residential or to participate in a MAP program. We're currently working towards having the capability or capacity to do medicated assisted treatment within the clinic. I mean, as we know, with some of those different drugs that are available to support people in the recovery process, has a little higher level of scrutiny to go through. So we're working through that process to make that available. And then through COVID, they had promoted me into a therapist position in order to support all the other individuals that were coming forward as a COVID response, whether it was addiction or depression, anxiety, or just your general behavioral health concerns. And in the process, we were working on bringing a peer support specialist. So now we have a peer support specialist who has went through the gamut of recovery, has sustained remission, and connect them up with individuals that need that level of care. So we've had recovery groups. We're currently doing the Red Road to Wellbriety. We do a Wellbriety group once a week. In the past, we've done drum groups, crafting groups, different things like that. COVID kind of changed the structure of our recovery support groups as we had transitioned into virtual communities to do that recovery work. And it's kind of hard to do B work virtually with individuals. And so we're waiting for that in-person aspect to start back up again. So there's a list of things that we do at NHBP for harm reduction and support. So hopefully that's a little information on that question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I'm harm reduction. For me, I'm seeing a lot of the areas where we're really lacking in. Sometimes I can just ruminate on the losses that we've had, and we've had a lot of losses lately in our community because of fentanyl overdoses, and every loss in our community feels like a failure. It's not my own personal failure, but it's a failure in the community, in the nation. And what we see in our communities is that these overdoses are hitting our communities really hard, and in fact we're seeing higher rates of premature mortality, premature death overall globally within American Indian communities. And so whatever we're doing that's working, we need to do more of that. And what we're doing that's not working, we need to stop. And we need to do all these changes immediately. I mean, it feels like that because I don't want to lose more beautiful Anishinaabe to this crisis. And so just what does harm reduction look like? Harm reduction in Bad River is you wouldn't see it if you didn't know it was there. You're not going to see it because we're not out. We don't have billboards out. We don't do a lot of broadcasting, and we've learned that a really effective way to help people who are still actively using and are at such high risk of death is to connect in with the networks that are already pre-existing, because there's already a whole community of people anywhere in America who are using drugs. Certainly after the floodgates of the opioid manufacturers closed down, you had millions of people who needed to continue using opioids in order to self-regulate. And so there's, we really work on, we really work on connecting up with those people and forming bonds of respect. And when we talk about culture, I am always trying to connect in with the culture of the people that I'm working with. And sometimes people who are using drugs and are in that world have a unique culture. And that includes just different ways of relating and language and all of that. And I try to be respectful and work with them, meeting them where they're at, and on a cultural level, and not just coming in and trying to dominate the relationship and using dominating language and all of that, but really work with them in a level that is respectful. We have not really had the capacity to do a lot of connections to care. We don't have, our harm reduction program doesn't have its own clinic or anything like that. And so what we've done is created relationships with FQHCs, with tribal clinics, and really elevated the voices of people who are using drugs to advocate for services and access to healthcare that they need and want. What we're seeing out there, like if you look at the peer-reviewed literature, the tools that have been used for decades to combat substance use disorder, like abstinence-based treatment and an AA and things like that, don't seem to be as effective at keeping people alive. In fact, they're really not effective at keeping people alive when they have been using fentanyl. And pretty much anybody in this country who's using street drugs at this point is probably using fentanyl. And maybe I'll ruffle some feathers in the drug using community, but I'm assuming that a lot of people are using fentanyl pretty regularly. So medications for opioid use disorder, medications like Suboxone, Sublocade, which is the injectable form of Suboxone, methadone, those are the medications that are keeping people alive. That's what the peer-reviewed literature is saying. And so we have been advocating for access to those medications within our community. It's been a fight and a struggle because there's a lot of stigma against these medications, which I feel like is very misplaced. There's been talk within the healthcare culture, even here in this community, that Indian people don't need those kind of meds. Like Indian people, they don't respond well to those things. And that kind of discussion, especially when there's no evidence to back that up, makes me crazy, because I'm looking at all the bodies in our community and all the people that we could have helped, but that have died. And at this point, we just need to stop and take into we really need to stop and take a look at how we're actually going to do the things that we need to do in our communities if a quarter of our population from like 20 to 50 is dead. I don't know how we're going to do that. I don't know how we're going to exercise our tribal sovereignty if people are dying. And so, I think we really need to, and I don't mean to be getting ahead of the conversation at all, but, I feel like for a lot of people who use drugs, culture has been a weapon. And there's been like a culture of healthcare, and even our traditional culture has been weaponized against them. Like, if you get high, you can't participate in our ceremonies. You can't come around. You can't smudge. You can't. There's all these you can'ts, and I feel like we have to recognize that has happened. And I don't know if those sorts of prohibitions are really in line with our old culture, or if this is like a piece of the colonized culture that has seeped in. I would like to get people back to those things and back to those connections, and help them realize that they're not dirty. They're not, there's nothing wrong with them, that they have a condition that has a name on it. And they're welcome to do ceremony with me any day. They can come and do ceremony with me. The only worry that I have is that, I don't want to put somebody in a position where they might be physiologically challenged, because some of the ceremonies that we do as Anishinaabe are kind of intense. But I think we need to bring people back in. And part of that is just standing up for what's right, and excluding people and telling people that they're somehow damaged or unclean or not good is that's not what we should be doing these days. We need to pull people in. And if they want to, when I'm working with somebody, like if they're interested in stopping the street drugs, I will do anything I can to get them to a place where they have what they need. But I'm also like one of these harm reduction principles is that we don't necessarily push on people to do one thing or the other. Like their bodily autonomy is really paramount.
So maybe you both could speak about, it kind of leads into what you and both Jonathan were leading into. Can you speak about the weaponizing of substance use and addiction within the Indian community, and how we can use our cultural teachings to help, one, normalize harm reduction practices, and two, how to get people back into ceremony and the culture without weaponizing them for this epidemic? And also, how can we make it more normalized in our communities? Because you and I, all three of us know, so my grant, we did it where they got the fentanyl mailed to them anonymously, because some people were afraid that people on the res, or outside of the res would see that they had Narcan in their vehicle, and you know how people assume. So maybe you guys could both talk. I know Jonathan uses the cultural and helping people in their recovery journey. I know you do as well, Filomeno, so maybe you guys can take about 5 minutes each to discuss how you utilize that and your community work.
Thank you. For me to say anything in 5 minutes, there's other ones that called me Zamdoon, and in our language, it means talks too much. So I'll try to keep it within 4 minutes and 59 seconds. So when my time's up, somebody just go like this. So one of the things I guess I want to back up on and just kind of state is that even picking up on what Filomeno was saying in regards to the boarding school era, amongst us, we could talk about historical trauma, and there's some terms and things that come up that we all recognize, and we can just interchangeably use them with different aspects and concepts that we're talking about. But just looking at the systemic process of genocide, forced assimilation, all of the different techniques and strategies that's happened through churches, through the government, right down to even our neighbors. As we're talking about seeing a Narcan kid on somebody's car seat, you might not want to keep that in extreme temperatures, but just the same, we have all of these different ways to, we're coining it here, weaponizing the culture. So one of the things that we have to recognize is that just because somebody has dark hair, high cheekbones, they're dark complected, they look like they're a full-blooded Indian, doesn't necessarily mean that they prescribe to those spiritual traditions. They could be involved in a different type of lodge or a different type of ceremony. And even amongst natives, there's so many different societies that are in the Anishinaabe Nation all by itself, whether it's, the Sundance, the Longhouse, the Daywind, the Shaky Tent, Wabanalong. There's so many different ceremonies that are conducted throughout Indian country, and we can't necessarily assume that just because somebody's native that they are even interested in that cultural aspect of that spiritual tradition. So meeting them where they're at is linking, connecting, and coordinating them to the services that they identify. But with that said, one of the things that I find in my practice when people come forward, one of the things that they talk about is they don't have a sense of identity or a sense of connection to these spiritual traditions, that they recognize that they descend from Native America, but lack the teachings and the exposures. Whether that goes back to just, I myself am a boarding school survivor. The boarding school that I went to closed its doors in the early 80s, mid 80s. I know what that's like to go through that particular process. And there wasn't no culture involved in that boarding school at Holy Childhood in Harbor Springs, Michigan. So people come forward and they want to know about the culture. But then, as Filomeno was saying, is that there's some ceremonies where we can't mix spirit. There's those substances that individuals are using. If we look at it, getting maybe perhaps a little too deep for this conversation today, but those things are in Indian country are considered medicine in the Indian way. And those spirits, just like that sage that I lit earlier, there's a spirit in that medicine that supports us and brings us, together in a good way. And so when we look at what's going on with, that particular battle, you have individuals that are disenfranchised from any spiritual tradition, because they may have a family member who did attend the boarding school and didn't have a very good experience and pushes them away from that spiritual teaching. But then they were alienated or removed or alienated from native spiritual tradition. And how hard is it for any of us to come forward and to ask for help or support or to learn something new, to be that vulnerable, to go, hey, look at me, I'm Native, but I struggle and I don't know how to access all these things. And so then when an individual comes through and sometimes they say, well, if you're currently high or using that, we don't mix these spirits, the spirit of that lodge or the spirit of those substances. Which some may believe that could hurt the practitioner, or that may take away from what the spirit, the help that's there at the ceremony can do for an individual if they are outside of themselves in that spiritual experience with their drug of choice, whether they're under the spirit influence of alcohol or opiates or whatever their drug of choice is. So in my practice, I'm in behavioral health, so I'm going to see that. I'm going to have that opportunity to interact with somebody who's in active use and come at them in a different way. That we could come alongside somebody and support them to that point to where they may be able to go to the bigger ceremony by just bringing them in and letting them interact with the things of our spiritual traditions. I'll give you an example, and there's still so much more that I'd like to say. I'm just going to give you a little mini case scenario or case example that I come across in the past. So I had one individual that came into the clinic, was intoxicated. Her coin frame for it was tanked to the tits. And so here she was, absolutely intoxicated, insisting that she sees a Native provider. I'm Native American and I want to talk to a Native. I'm at an Indian health clinic. I should be able to talk to a Native, and just, really escalating. Well, jumping into a different part of my story, part of the reason of her escalation was because of the intensity of the feelings that she held up to that moment, deciding that she wants to go forward and get help. She had sat with that and contemplated for so long that energy was so exciting to her that all she could do was act out. Something happened in her brain where she was in, activation mode and was ready to whip an ass if necessary to finally get what it was that she came forward. So the front desk says, hey, Jonathan, we got somebody out here. We'd love to have you go talk to him. I'm like, oh, yeah. Bring it. Those are my favorites. I want those ones that are all kinds of upset. So I walked out there, and here's this individual who was ready to just fly off the handle. And I says, hey, the concern that you have, it is such a private matter. Can I offer you to come back to my office where you and I could talk? Eliminated the individual from the audience and all that other stuff to get them contained, so that here it's just you and them working together. And so she come back into my office and sat down, and so I took out my abalone shell and I put my sage in there. I said, can I offer you a smudge? I'm sitting here with lighter in hand ready to go. And she's like, oh, no, you can't do that. I've been told you can't smudge while you're under the influence of alcohol. I says, well, I've heard that too. But in the meanwhile, in the between time, if I actually wait for you to be a sober mind to interact with this medicine, would that happen? And she said, well, probably not. And I says, well, I'm of the opinion that here you are today, and you're here for that medicine. So if it's okay with you, I ask permission, right? And ask in a couple of different ways and get them to give that permission. So I lit that. And as this individual was bringing that smudge to herself, those tears rolled out. She had a very strong emotional response that she was received for the human being that she was, and was given the empowerment to start accessing her recovery journey just by removing that one particular limitation. So with that, if we're allowing the individuals to kind of guide their direction and be there in a supported and non-judgmental way, and to make these things available. At one particular point, this individual was able to get ready to participate with a group setting. So to move the individual from that contemplation point to getting them involved into recovery groups regularly is a phenomenal success. So I hope that speaks a little bit to the question.
Yeah, that's awesome. I kind of forgot the question, but because I got so involved in that story.
How you use tradition and cultural into your help and work with those that are struggling with addiction or recovery efforts?
Yeah, well, you know, I use the power of prayer a lot, you know, and I pray for the people that I'm in relationship with. And you know, that's a really it ends up being a powerful thing, because you start praying with someone, you pray with tobacco for someone, and your souls become connected. And I feel like that that kind of connection, it lasts forever, you know. And I started praying for these women when I was in my role as child welfare officer, the officer of the court, and I would have these. I would pray for them and all their families and everyone connected to them before any sort of, you know, major interaction like a court hearing and things. And I feel like those prayers were transformative and healing, and not just for them but for me. And you know, those prayers were the prayers that took me from a place of judgment that I you know, that I had formerly been at, you know, that sort of boarding school mentality, to a place of inquiry and, you know, wonder, and really thinking about you know, all the possibilities, and if I could, you know, if I could see these things differently. So I mean, I use culture and prayer like a lot for myself. I don't I think there's a lot of like Joe was talking about, a lot of fear in the community of people who uses drugs, that they don't want to disrupt any ceremonies or harm any ceremonies or get in the way of that, because there's such a respect in our communities for you know, for the work of our spiritual and cultural practitioners. So I feel like you really have to, just like Jonathan said, you really have to take a kind of a gentle touch when you're introducing those things. But I always, you know, I grow sage and I offer people, you know, sage if they want to have that. You know, there's our, you know, our place here in Bad River, we're not urban at all. We're like in the sticks. And so people are out, you know, praying, going to the lake a lot. And I'm always encouraging that sort of thing. You know, putting out tobacco. I am not, you know, I'm not like a person that's necessarily traditional. I mean, maybe I am, but I don't really, I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. I'll always bring people along if they want to like do the stuff that I'm doing, but I'm not like an expert in anything. And you know, oftentimes I'm kind of on the outsides. But I don't know if I answered that question.
So integrating culture and you know, spiritual traditions, whether we're native or non-native, we're all indigenous to this planet. And so it's not that we would suggest that you would just all of a sudden try native approaches and tactics to support individuals in the recovery process. There was a question over there: how could a non-native be able to integrate native traditions? Well, in some ways, our capacity is facilitation to guide and to direct individuals to link, connect, and coordinate individuals to resources that would support the recovery. So it's not to say that individuals cannot become aware of these spiritual traditions. I mean, a lot of ancient cultures that had incorporate smudges in their spiritual traditions. If it's just to have a braid of sweetgrass that's sitting out in your office, and you know, if anybody who knows what it is, it'll catch their attention. They have that smudge pot, sitting around in an office. I mean, anybody who knows may inquire about that. Or you see their attention turned to it, and then you like go, "Oh yeah, hey, you know about that? I'd love to. Can we smudge?" I mean, this medicine was put on Earth for the inhabitants to use. And some of these medicines in one form or another grows in different regions across the planet. So these medicines are available, but to work in maybe some of your awareness or knowledge of those indigenous practices, but also to support the individual, linking up, connecting. There's 12 or 13 different, I think there's 12 federally recognized tribes. Most of them do have their own Indian Health Center with traditional healing. There's also even one Indian center over there in the Detroit area that's there to support individuals. One of the things that we ask about is the bridges, are the gaps that exist between those that are federally recognized, tribal members to federally recognized tribes. It's a kind of a touchy thing because an individual may identify as a descendant of a Native American tribe, but through the treaty eras and all the treaties and what identifies as a tribal citizen, it can dictate whether they can access some of the supportive services through Indian Health Services, where Indian Health Services has means and mechanisms to recognize descendants not being those that are federally member of a federally recognized tribe or a state recognized tribe. But if they can prove their descendancy to the native tribe via birth certificates and family trees and tribal enrollment cards, then the individual may be able to gain access to it. But in part of that crabs in the bucket thing, we have some natives that hold the privileges to the culture and the ceremony for those who are registered with the tribe. But that's not how our teachings are. Our teachings are is that we make decisions today that will impact 7 generations down the road, and that there was things that happened in the past that our ancestors says, let's make sure this lifeway is available to our descendants, not necessarily meaning those that qualify for a tribal membership. I recognize that we're kind of running close to the end of our time here, and I want to turn it back to Joe, our facilitator here, for any questions that might have came up that we might be able to answer.
Hey, I want to pop on real quick. There's a question from Chelsea Carr about you were talking about this, Jonathan. Incorporating culture in a residential treatment facility. I mean, one suggestion that I would have is through art. There's a lot of great. I feel like as a Native person, when I walk into a facility and I see some Native art, that'll instantly connect me with that place, and I feel like I'm not alone in that experience. I used to work for Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. Glyphwick.org is a website, and they have a lot of Glyphwick produces a poster every year that is incredible, and it's the posters are about, oftentimes they're about spiritual themes about our more than human being relatives, and so Glyphwick you can purchase Glyphwick posters from the website and stick it in a frame. Buy a couple of those, stick them in a frame, and put them on your wall. And I feel like that could be a really easy way to incorporate some culture into your residential treatment. Maybe that's not there's other things, deeper things that really should be considered, but that would be like a really easy thing to just do right away. You know, and on the question of enrollment status and native and non-native and all that. So when we developed our program, our harm reduction program, with no money and really no tribal money, we decided that we were going to make it open to everyone. And that's how we've done it. And that's how we've always done it. We've got, you know, this is not an IHS funded activity at this point. And because of that, we have really, really broad and open parameters for participation. We felt like it was more, our program would be more effective if we didn't have to certainly, like if we didn't have to verify somebody's identity, your harm reduction program is going to be more effective. And we also recognize that in our communities, there's a lot of natives that are in relationship with non-natives. And if we're trying to prevent HIV, why would we just serve native people? So that approach has been effective for the work that we do. It's not healthcare. What we do is not at all healthcare. And we provide our services anonymously. I'm not tracking anybody's, they don't have to register with us. I don't need their name. Sometimes we keep data, like we'll keep data at different points during the year, but we're mostly just keeping data related to the contacts that we have. And we might like put down the racial group that we know that they belong to, or that we suspect that they belong to. Oh, you're back. Good. But that has kept the harm reduction program really flexible. So it's kind of a hard, it's a little bit of a hard topic. Like I have relatives, look at how white I am, right? So I'm a tribal member, but I have relatives that are, much more like racially native that aren't actually Native American, because their tribe has an enrollment requirement that is related to blood quantum, and they don't fit those parameters. So it's goofy, like my way, who passed away, years ago, Tibisana Kwetibun, he would always talk about, if it's like the one drop rule for Anishinaabe is, if you are part of this, if your family is Anishinaabe, you're Anishinaabe, and you need to be part of these ceremonies. You need to have your name, and all of that is separate from your tribal status and your enrollment card. Those are separate identities. Like we have our enrollment cards for IHS and the federal government, but our real enrollment card is our traditional name, and I would hope that these treatment programs and facilities would facilitate people to be able to get their names. That's a very important part in our process of understanding who we are and our role and our place in our communities is having that name. Learning about our clan, and learning about all of that. Those are things that are so critical for our identity as Native people. And, I feel like even, like I grew up in the suburbs in Minneapolis, basically. And my very best friend in the world, my sister, she did too. She grew up in like the suburbs, and she's Dakota from Sisseton Wapiton. But having that relationship and connection with the spirit and with our spiritual identity and having my spirit name, all those things has been absolutely critical in order to stay alive, because we, our culture, like our people, have been subjected to such incredible challenges that we really need to I guess we lost Jonathan again. That that spiritual base, that cultural base is really critical for processing all that trauma that we've dealt with as Native people. So I don't know. I guess that's it. That's it for me. Me at you.
So I wanted to thank everybody. I saw a couple comments. It's important to understand when I said earlier that this harm reduction thing looks different in every Indian community. Some of us are on the practice of decolonization. So therefore, we don't adhere, we don't acknowledge, we don't submit to Western culture, we don't submit to Western medicine practices or anything like that. And that's us exercising our tribal sovereignty. And that goes along with the things that Philomena and Jonathan were talking about getting our names and our clans and things like that. So maybe that will help explain some of the things that were said today and where the panelists were coming from. And yet some of our people in our community, they walk both worlds, right? I don't, but others do. So it's important to understand that we as Indigenous people of the North and South continents, we have body autonomy due to our sovereignty. And that's the first and foremost important thing for any recovery efforts or going back into the culture. It was one of the first things I learned as a youth. And when I started working with Jonathan and others in the community, is that I have the autonomy, I have the sovereignty, and I don't need any confirmation from my non-native people to tell me that, right? And sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. Anyhow, in our language, we do not have a word for Bamapi or for goodbye. We have a word that says, hey, I'll see you later. I'll see you again till we see each other on the trail. That word is Bamapi. And Chimigwich is a big thank you in our language. And I want to say Chimigwich to all of you that attended, that posted comments and questions, compliments, inquired about Philomena's website, Jonathan's book references, Jonathan's work. I want to thank each and every one of you for that. Our time ends here in about 30 seconds. And we will be on break till 10:30. And then I think there's a possible breakout room for those that are interested. So we will take a 5-minute break. And if they decide to have the breakout room, we'll go back in there. And I'm not sure how long that lasts, but I think that's more like a table talk discussion. So again, Chimigwich to all of you. Thank you to the state of Michigami for making sure that we had a space this year. And again, Bamapi.